are endangered carnivorous plants and their unique soil situations. Here we have a butterwort and a sundew, two carnivorous plants that are slowly becoming extinct in the wild due to losing their only habitat to urbanization.
Just give me a few days to heal, okay? Then we'll start again on the left hand and... me. I beg your pardon? Feed me. Tui, you talked. You opened your trap, you thing, and you said... Feed me, Carbon! Feed me now! I can't. I'm starving! Look, maybe I can squeeze a little more out of this one. More! There isn't any more. What do you want me to do, slit my wrists? Oh boy, look, I got an idea. I'm gonna go down to Schmendrick's and pick up some nice chopped sirloin. Must be blood. Tui, that's disgusting. Must be fresh. I don't want to hear this. Does it have to be human? Does it have to be mine? Where am I supposed to get it? Missy Mo. Feed me all night long. That's right, boy. You can do it. Feed me, Simo. Feed me all night long. 'Cause if you feed me, Simo, I can grow up big and strong. You eat blood, Audrey, too. Let's face it. How am I supposed to keep on feeding you? Kill people? I make it worth your while. What? You think this is all coincidence?
The Venus flytrap. The Venus flytrap is a plant native to North and South Carolina that grows in a 75 square mile radius in the wild and cannot be located anywhere else in the United States any longer. It is an endangered species. It has hefty laws that are protecting it at this point. It is illegal to poach this plant. It comes from the St. John soil series in North and South Carolina. It requires very acidic soil as well as low pH. Darwin first believed that this plant was carnivorous because of the low nitrogen available in its soil. This plant is important to us because it controls pests and can be used in very small organic farming situations. The reason why these are great components for small organic gardens is because they will eat all the pests without any external treatments. If you wanted to grow one of these at home, you can obtain one from a small nursery, or you can grow them from seeds, but it typically does take a couple years. They recommend that you use 2 parts peat moss to 1 part silica sand. Silica sand can be a lot harder to obtain than one might think, but once you are able to obtain it, it is very important that you rinse your silica sand several times before planting your Venus flytrap. However, if you are unable to obtain silica sand, you can use regular sand in your 2-to-1 ratio, peat moss 2-to-1. Just use the soil survey to find regular sand. It is very important that you only use distilled water or rainwater to water your Venus flytrap. It is also very important that you use a container that has holes in the bottom. This is because your Venus flytrap needs to remain moist, but you do not want to flood the Venus flytrap. If your container does not have holes in the bottom, you will need to put holes in the bottom of your container so that it can drain appropriately. Under no circumstances will you ever use fertilizer for these plants. Peat moss has a very high pH, around 4.5, and that is what is necessary for Venus flytraps. Here you will add 2 handfuls worth of peat moss, which is to complete your 2-to-1 ratio. And then you will add your high sand soil, which will complete your 1 ratio, and you will mix these 2 soils before adding your plants. Here you can see that I am adding my high sand soil, and I am stirring it up with my peat moss, and then I will be adding my Venus flytraps, of which I purchased 5 to the containers. They come in a moss, and then I will be watering them. They will often recommend that you break them up a little bit better than I have, but I personally am terrified of doing damage to the plant, so I placed them in there and broke the moss apart a little better after it had been in there for a day or two, as you'll be able to see today in class. The moss was extremely compacted, and what also I will mention is that for Venus flytraps, ideally, a very large tub is a better idea. If you watch YouTube, you will see several carnivorous plant gardens are done in large storage tubs, and you can put several plants such as pitcher plants, which is another carnivorous plant, in these gardens and mix them up. They are very lovely. Issues that we have discussed this semester that highly affect this plant are, for example, deforestation. This plant does not compete well against other plants, and so it is vital that occasional forest fires occur in its area to keep it from having to compete. But because of deforestation in its area, there is no litter now on the forest floor. This is causing medium-sized plants to grow and take away from the sunlight needed for the Venus flytrap. And it's having to fight for the little bit of nutrients that it does obtain from other sources than insects. And it is causing it to decrease in population. Studies have shown that this is very accurate information. Another issue is infiltration because of the increased urbanization in the area. The wetlands that it thrives in are located in the Carolina Bay and run to the Santee River in South Carolina, which happens to be a popular area that people are buying housing in. Because of urbanization, its thriving location is being destroyed, and so it has shrunk drastically over the years and is now endangered. Here I'm just going to go back over the facts of this soil series one more time. It is found in North and South Carolina. It is the St. John soil series. It is a sandy soil with a high acidity, a low pH, a low soil fertility, found in the Carolina Bay and in the Santee River. It runs about a 75 square mile radius.
They snap, they trap, they stick, and they suck. This is the bizarre world of carnivorous plants, leafy creatures that eat everything from insects to crustaceans to mammals. I'm Anna, and this is Gross Science. The vast majority of plants only require a few things to survive: sunlight, water, air, and mineral nutrients, which they typically get from the soil or pond water they're growing in. These nutrients are elements like nitrogen and phosphorus, which are building blocks for making things like DNA and proteins. But most carnivorous plants live in places without a lot of nutrients, like peat bogs. So to really thrive, they draw extra nutrition from the bodies of unsuspecting prey. Now, carnivory has actually evolved multiple times in plants all over the world, giving rise to some wildly diverse and morbidly beautiful methods for food. So Vanessa from Braincraft and I bought a few carnivorous plants.
They're so beautiful.
They really are.
Yeah.
And I'm going to show you some of my favorites. You ready, Vanessa?
I'm scared and kind of excited all at once.
Me too. Okay, so first, this is the bladderwort. These guys live in watery environments, but they have these small, empty chambers growing from their stems. When a tiny creature, like a crustacean, passes by, it brushes against these things called trigger hairs. The hairs make the door to the chamber pop open, and as water rushes in to fill the empty space inside, the tiny crustacean gets sucked in too. This entire process happens in less than 1,000th of a second. The video you're watching here has been slowed way down. Then the bladderwort releases digestive enzymes into the chamber to break down the insect's body and lap up its nutrients. After its meal, the chamber squeezes out all the water, closes the door, and is ready to catch more prey.
Wow.
But that's only one variety of carnivorous plant. Other types of carnivorous plants act totally differently. For example, the leaves of sundews are covered in delicate, wispy hairs, each with a teeny drop of liquid at the end. Thinking the liquid is actually delicious nectar, insects fly in to grab a tasty drink. But those dewdrops are actually sticky and trap the bug. The wispy tentacles curl around the insect, holding it tight and maximizing the number of hairs it touches, which speeds up digestion.
What I find so cool is the way that sundews operate is like a botanical version of brains and muscles. So while they don't have any brain cells, they do have chemical signals to move, which kind of acts like a brain.
That's so amazing. It's a really good analogy.
Yeah.
The other really cool thing is that there are some carnivorous plants that actually capture prey without moving at all. So pitcher plants have deep basins filled with digestive enzymes. Insects venture in looking for food, but then they can't get back out. There are tons of different varieties of these plants, but in this species, called Sarracenia flava, the inside of the pitcher is slippery, so bugs fall in and then can't crawl up the walls. They also have these downward pointing hairs at the bottom of the pitcher that make climbing out even more difficult for the insects. And some species of pitcher plant can catch more than just bugs. Certain tropical pitcher plants are so large that they've been known to trap small rodents like mice and rats.
That's scary. It's very scary.
It absolutely is. But next is a type of plant that might be a little bit more familiar.
It is more familiar.
This is the Venus flytrap. These plants have book-like leaves which emit a sweet smell that attracts insects like flies. When a fly lands on the leaf, it brushes against trigger hairs. Touching the hair sends a little electric charge through the leaf, and each charge stimulates pores to open, which allow move from one part of the leaf to another. The changes in water pressure make the book snap shut in under a second. However, the plant will only close if at least 2 hairs are touched in under about 20 seconds, or if the same hair is triggered twice in the same amount of time. Then the struggling prey needs to touch more hairs before the flow of digestive juices begins. This keeps the plant from wasting precious resources on a false alarm, like a floating speck of dirt or a curious human setting off the snare for fun.
So when you're talking about these electrical charges, you're really referring to something called action potentials. And these are signals our own brain's neurons use to pass on information to each other. So we don't tend to think about it, but it's kind of amazing how similar we are to plants.
Yeah, we don't tend to think about it, and that is really amazing.
Yes.
And Vanessa actually has a whole video about this over on her channel, so I will put a link to it somewhere on the screen. Definitely go check it out. Extraordinary. In fact, there are over 750 individual species of carnivorous plants worldwide. And by the way, many of them are really easy to find and to care for. So if you have any of these plants at home, let me know, because I would love to see your gruesomely beautiful garden grow.
This one's really sticky.
Ew.
In 2017, a greenhouse experiment was done to test if carnivorous plants are digesting insects simply because the soil is poor in nitrogen, or if there might be another reason for this mechanism. Some plants were provided nitrogen-rich soil, while others were provided with laboratory-reared fruit flies. Plant growth was measured above and below ground for 13 weeks for all of the plants. 13 weeks later, the plants receiving the fruit flies had grown significantly higher, 4 times as much in fact. This led scientists to believe that there was a possibility that there might be another reason for this mechanism in the carnivorous plants. Some scientists now theorize that the mechanism might actually be an adaptation due to the low porosity of the roots in the carnivorous plants, rather than the lack of soil nutrients, but this remains to be proven. If this turns out to continue to have similar studies done with the same results, this could be huge.